Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to compliment you on your assessment of the iPhone Samsung problem. A lot of people had some good suggestions on which would be the best phone. But the question really came down to how do we use equations? We wrote two equations that we were able to model here. The two equations were y equals 20x plus 240 for the iPhone because it has a down payment of 240, and for the Samsung y equals 40x for $40 every month. And pretty much everyone said they knew that the iPhone was more expensive at first. And when I asked this final question, how can we use the equations to find out when and how and if which phone would be more? Some people said you can use the equations to graph a solution. Well, that's what we did. If you recall, we used the equations here and we graphed them on a graph. By the way, some folks need a little extra practice on graphing their slope and y-intercept. But we noticed on the graph that this point is the important point because it tells us where the two lines are equal, where the two costs are equal. So if you'll notice here on the x-axis at 12 months, the cost is going to be the same at $480. So it is true. We could use our graphs to find the point where the two lines cross, where the costs are the same. Another student, well, actually there were several, but another couple students said, yeah, if we're going to compare these equations, couldn't we make a table and see when it costs more? And we also did that, if you recall. We used the two tables and we found that in the two tables, when the x, which was months, equaled 12, the cost, which is y, was $480 for the iPhone, and lo and behold, in the same thing, the Samsung at X months, 12 months, cost $480. So here's where they were equal on the table. But the question still remained. How can we use just the equations to find out when these two costs would be equal? So here's what some other students said. For both equations, X can equal the same amount of months paid. This is true. If we can find out which X is true for both equations, then we will know. We could also, this person said, I'm not sure, maybe if you solve the equations it will show. And I think this comes the closest to what we're going to have to do. But we're still wondering, how do we solve the equations? So how do we solve them together? Remember, we're looking for when the cost is the same. So if y is the same, we can take 20x plus 240, which is what y equals, and we can set that equal to the other phone, 40x, which is what the cost is for that one. We want to know where these two phones are equal, where the two costs are the same. Now, we've solved equations before, but you'll notice that this equation is a little different. So before we actually talk about how to solve this kind of equation, let's take a look and review some of the ways we've solved equations using our algebra tiles to model before. So you'll recall that when we used Braining Camp, we modeled our equations. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. So the first example is 3x minus 8 equals 7. And we drew a line down through the center to show the two sides had to remain balanced. We added the opposite for any subtraction. And then we took a look at the equation. We said, all right, now, in order to model this, we're going to start with our positive x's. So they are the green, 1, 2, 3 x's. Now we need negative 8. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then on this side we have positive 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. Now, with that in mind, we are now going to take a look at getting rid of this number first. The goal, remember, is to get x by itself. We want this x all by itself here at the bottom with some number over here, some number of squares over here. Has to be a green X, remember. All right, now to do that, we are going to get rid of, starting here with the number that's added or subtracted. So we have to get rid of these -8. So to do that, we are going to add +8. So that's going to look like this. 1, 2. Remember, 1 positive cancels out the 1 negative, makes it 0. So we cancel out by adding 8 positives. But if we 8 positives to this side, we need to add 8 to this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now the next thing we're going to have to do is we don't want 3 of these. We're going to have to divide this up into 3 groups. So we're going to divide this by 3. And if you recall, we do that by, I like to turn them. Okay, and then we're going to separate our tiles here into 3 groups also, both sides, oops, and here. So what we have is we have an X by itself, 1 green X, equal to 5. So my solution is X equals 5. All right, let's try one more. So this one we're going to look at -8 equals -2x plus 2. Draw a line down through the center. Now let's recall we are going to need 8 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We will need 2 negative x's. Okay, now remember the negative x's are these, the bigger ones. They're red because they're negative, but they're the bigger ones. So in order to use those, we'll have -1, -2, and then we need over here +2. So that's going to be 1, 2. Now the first thing to solve this equation, we have to get the x by itself. So we've got to get rid of, don't want -2 and we don't want the +2. So we always get rid of the number that's added or subtracted first. So we have to get rid of these 2. And to do that, we're going to have to add -2. So we take -1 and -1 because 1 negative cancels out 1 positive. And then we'll need a -1 and a -1 here. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we want to take these 2 and separate them because we want each one by itself. So there we go. I could turn them if I want. I just didn't take a moment to do it. Then we need to divide this into 2 groups. So I've got 5, I think, there and 5 here. So you'll notice I've got a problem. I cannot have a red X. I have to have a green X. So if you recall, we can change this to the opposite sign, and we can take the opposite of this. So my final answer is 5 equals X. Now what you're going to do is you're going to go to, Seesaw has an assignment, and that's going to tell you to go to brainingcamp.com. Here is the username and password that you will use. You might want to jot that down. You're going to do a screen recording of your modeling of the 2 equations that I listed there. You're going to show all the steps, as we just did in this video, to model finding the solution. Then you're going to upload the screen recording to Seesaw. Now, if you haven't done that before, here are the steps that you'll use. I would jot down the equations first, and I would open Braining Camp and sign in first. Then you're going to swipe in the right corner of up here in the right corner of your screen. If you swipe down, you'll access the controls. You're going to press and hold the record button, which allows you to turn the microphone on. Make sure you turn it on, and then you can do start recording. Once you're done, you stop the recording, and then you can upload that to Seesaw to be graded.